Do you have any idea why I picked that title? Because when I was asked to actually pick the title, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to talk about. And I had to somehow make it work. Anyway, so the first thing I did is I went to Google and tried to figure out, okay, how am I actually going to make this talk interesting for you guys? And the first thing I found is like open with a joke. Should I spare you, or do you actually want to hear the joke I found? Because it was so hopeless I couldn't actually come up with one myself. Okay, I'll give it to you because there's also a I'll do. Okay, so you're all sitting here and you're probably thinking, oh, that's actually smart and logical human beings, right? So I'm just going to throw that out of the window in 10 seconds. Now, as soon as I step out and I'm standing here in front of you, you're all acting like chimpanzees with just human software installed in your brain, right? Everyone thinks I'm going to talk about this thing and I'm going to have some sort of expertise and authority over the topic, right? I'm just going to be completely honest. I have no idea. I just came over here to talk about this thing because this is generally the things I struggle with understanding like every single day. Like this is what I work with, and it's damn hard. I don't know how to actually do it. I'm just going, exploring, and see what works out and what doesn't work out for me, right? So I'll just share some, things I'm learning through the process, so you might as well benefit. Right. So this is kind of what's going to happen. Like the real title of the talk is more about like how we personalize systems at scale, which is a very real and a very hard problem. I mean, it's very real because it's happening right now. It's happening across so many industries, across so many companies. It's almost like the holy grail for a lot of them. It's the holy grail, holy grail definitely for marketing. Like everyone wants to target the customers that are relevant and are interested in, having some buy-in in the product or the service offering that we have for them. They're not interested in, showing them something that they don't care about. So this is kind of like the layout of what we're going to go through today. I'll briefly go over like a small story and try hopefully to convince you why this thing matters. I'm not a product manager myself. I'm just like an analyst supporting the data science and product teams. But from what I see, like the glimpses I get, I would definitely recommend it. Then we're going to quickly go and talk about some like the common problems, conundrums, and sort of pitfalls that you can run across by going through this process of iterating over your development life cycle for your product, right? And then this is the part of the talk where everything I know and makes sense finishes. And then from there on is like stuff I have no idea about. But I'll try my best. So I'll just share my thoughts on how I think, like what I think are some useful tools and techniques and ways to tackle some of these problems. And then sort of wrap up with just a very quick slide touching on how things are evolving and what sort of interesting techniques and tools are slowly becoming more and more available for us to use to, do these things better. And with that, I'll just leave you. So here we go with the first part. So why does personalization matter, right? Why should we invest time, resources, and money into this thing? I'll just give you like a very short retrospective of where we kind of are with product design. There's like a super interesting article on this that I do have at the end of the presentation, along with some other references for you to pick up. I know that this should be like a really tiny and friendly URL here, but it's been cut off in the screen. I'll show it at the end, and then I think you're also going to get the slides anyway, right? So you can go and pick those up. Now, let's get into it. So, what's the first thing we do when we come up with a business idea or set up a plan or something? Like, we need to come up with a product, and we need to find some customers, right? And we need to make sure that our product is of interest for our customers, so they're willing to go out of their way, or they have like a need, or they're willing to spend their money to actually buy the product. And that's like the very basic vanilla design, right? I need to come up with a product that has a niche, like spot in the market, and it's actually wanted. So we go and do that. We come up with this product. We have some customers that are interested, and off they go. They buy it. We make some money. Everything's going good, right? So hopefully, at this point, we actually care about our customers. I hope you all do, genuinely. So we want to make this product better for our customers, so that our customers can actually get better value out of our product. And we're not only just doing it to build competition and because we want our company to grow and make more money, but because we're also interested in what value and what outcome does buying or using this product or service that we offer has on our customers. So we really want to actually get the experience right. That the experience in the sense that the people that engage with our product, engage with our service, or buy our product, buy our service, actually get something meaningful out of it. Not just out of the product, but also the experience of interacting with us as a company, as a service provider, or anything like that. So what do we do about that? Off we go, and we optimize the product. How do we optimize the product? We do all the usual product management stuff that all of you are going to probably spend a lot of time doing if you go into that as a career, or if you're already in it as a career. So we spend a lot of time optimizing across different devices, multiple touch points. We optimize the experience for different browsers, screen sizes. We create like a fantastic unified seamless experience across all of these things. We introduce maybe some dynamic content. Maybe we introduce some user-generated content so that people that have already used our product or service can share their experience with this with other people, and then that can create like a sort of nice feedback loop if they're actually happy, and then we attract more people to become interested in our company and our product. Then we maybe introduce better data management practices. So we start storing user session data, then we analyze this data, find insights, and then further improve the product. Maybe we also leverage cross-session data, cross-device data. So you create like this fantastic user experience that is interconnected. Like it doesn't matter if you log in from your laptop or you jump straight away into your mobile phone. We can offer you the same experience across all these different points, and that's a fantastic thing. And it's not easy. Actually, the technology and the infrastructure behind is it's quite substantial. But the point I kind of want to stress is what comes after that. Does anyone have any idea? No, right? I don't have either. Actually, the very interesting article I have linked in the references at the end sort of tries to tackle this. I don't think the author has a very solid opinion on this, but he's at least trying to tackle it. It's a very interesting read. It's a very long one, but I do definitely recommend it. So I think the idea behind this is we do all these optimization efforts, and there must be some sort of pattern or common factor across all of them, right? If we do an ad hoc optimization, let's say optimize our user, the user experience for our users in a specific country, right? There's probably something we've done in the process we've gone to optimize that experience that we can carry over for the users in all of the other countries that we have our product available for, right? So there's this idea that somehow all these things we're doing must have like an underlying common factor in how we're approaching and tackling them, right? So this outcome, be a single outcome or be like a collection of outcomes that we're hoping that our customers are getting out of our product and we're optimizing for, I hope, if we've chosen the right metrics, is somehow interconnected. And with my last point, I would say is like, actually as humans are kind of hopeless at actually detecting and managing this. That's why we need machine intelligence for this. Like we need smart systems, we need intelligent systems, because no human can actually understand patterns at that scale and optimize for them. So we go away and we build these incredibly complex systems that we really struggle actually to understand ourselves what they're doing. At this point, I just want to quickly touch base about the process, and I hope that most of you would have seen a variation of one of these two to some extent, maybe different words, maybe different cycles, but I just want you to get the gist of it. This is the idea of how we usually manage our products, right? We want to understand what our customers need, what they're struggling with, then we spend some time designing a new feature, a new service, or something that we think is going to address that problem or is going to make the experience better for our users. Then we go out and experiment, so we want to actually test that what we think is good for them is actually good for them, because there's no point of giving them something that they're not going to make use of. And hopefully, if it's good, we measure the impact so we can make an informed decision, then go back ahead and start over again. And over and over and over again. And that's pretty much kind of like product management in a nutshell. It is a lot more complex and intricate than that, but that's kind of a rough idea of how things work. Now, here I just want to very quickly sort of touch base on how, as we go through this process over and over and over again, and we're building all these nice systems, we're actually introducing more complexity than simplicity in our systems, which is kind of expected, right? You know, like we're introducing more services, we're doing like small tweaks here and there, we go over and over again, and then it becomes more complex there rather than becoming more simple, obviously. So let's take an example, like a very simple example. I'll just take Netflix because everyone's familiar with it and likes Netflix, right? And no association here. I have no idea if they've done anything like this. It's just like a completely hypothetical example. So let's say we're at the very early stages of Netflix, right? So they want to introduce some sort of recommendation algorithm, right? You look into Netflix, what should come up at the top of the list for you to select, oh, I should watch this film or this series or whatever, right? And what's like the silliest approach we can take? We have, you know, a set of movies that we have available on Netflix, just pick one randomly, push it there, see what happens. It's probably not going to do great, but still people are going to use our service if it's good enough, if it has like a big enough selection and for us to be interested in. So we try to do better, right? We try to build let's build a very, very simple algorithm. Let's take, let's say, the ratings or rankings in IMDb and sort according to that and push these recommendations. It's probably going to do a little bit better. Now, what happens next? Our analysts like crunch all the data and they find out that, you know, out of this list of recommendations that we're pushing to our users, our North American users have a preference for comedy over drama, or our European users have a preference for romance, or something like that. So we give this insight to our data scientists, and they go do some really, really smart stuff. They engineer an algorithm that actually boosts these categories for the relevant markets. And we test this, and it's performing fantastically for some countries. It's maybe not doing so great for some other. And what do we decide to do? We decide to roll this change out for the markets that is actually doing good, but hold it back for those that is not doing great. Now this has already introduced a very big problem in what we do. We have just introduced some product parity, right? We have one version of the algorithm that we're serving in some users, and a different version of the algorithm that we're serving for some other users. So any feature that comes after that needs to be separately designed and engineered in these two different variations, right? So what happens next? Then we get slapped with a piece of legislation, just because it happens, and this is what actually happens in the real world. So for 5 specific countries, they've decided that they don't want us to display any violence or gore images in like the thumbnails that you get in the recommendations at the top of your list, right? So we have to go and blacklist those images specifically. So what have we done? We have like this very smart system that's doing all these recommendations and stuff, and then we've introduced some logic that says, oh, if this image, then exclude. That doesn't sound very smart, right? And you can imagine as we go over time, more and more and more and more of these things happen. And before you even know it, this behemoth has ended up being completely unmanageable, right? So what do I kind of like propose? That's what I'm gonna walk you through. And I don't really have an end solution for this, obviously. It's just like my thinking and my process for doing this. Very quickly, before we go into that, just kind of want to touch base on why does this happen, apart from what we discussed? Why do we end up with this fantastic jumble of spaghetti code and algorithms and whatever? Like this complexity that we just didn't hope for and might not actually be doing us good. We do this because we really like prototyping fast. So if we think we can deliver a better product, optimize our product, or deliver a better service, we want to do it now. We don't want to do it tomorrow. We want to bring this to our customers today, as soon as possible, right? So we build all these like MVPs, like minimum viable products, and we test them. We try to get them out there as soon as we can so we can iterate on them fast, learn more, then spend the time optimizing them, making them better, and pushing it to more people, right? And also we do this because we need to do all these iterations, not only because we're learning, but because, you know, if it's a hard problem, whoever in the history of humankind ever got a hard problem solved at the first go, right? No one. So we have a go and then we try it again and again and again, and it might take us like 10, 20, 30, 50 tries before we actually get the outcome we're hoping for. These are, I guess, like slightly more technical, but these are the things that do happen out there. You might have to introduce some whitelisting or blacklisting logic. Like I said, like before, we get slapped with a piece of legislation. It happens, and it's a very real thing. You need to do it, and it's not doing any justice or any good for whatever complex system you're trying to design. Your system may have dependencies that change over time, they break. Your technology stack relies on a lot of services. One of the tech teams just changed something and it broke it, right? So your engineers or developers need to go and hack a solution together that may not be optimal. That's the way to do it and fix it for now, right? And more of these things happen, and we get this. And what I really want to highlight here is like, it's not a product, it's not a software problem, it's not a data science or management problem, it's just like, it is a complex systems problem. Like, no matter what industry, what you're doing, it doesn't need to be an algorithm, it could be just a process or something else, right? And as things get more complex, these things happen. It's kind of inevitable. But here is like what I've found so far that kind of helps me cope through this. And for this part, you will have to endure me as I try and read through and break this down, because I found this super, super interesting. So this guy, Ben Victor, is quite famous for this stuff that he does. He actually has another very interesting article that, again, is going to be linked in the references. And again, I do really recommend that you go and read that. And this is like a small snippet of what he has in that article. And he says, how can we design systems when we don't know what we're doing? Right? Hard. The most exciting engineering challenges lie on the boundary of theory and the unknown. So it's kind of like we're doing stuff that we don't know what they are, but we're not completely hopeless at actually trying to hack them together and make something out of them, right? So we don't have enough theory to predict the results, or for this, but we can try and understand. And the most interesting part that I want to highlight is like this last part that says systems that sort of live at this boundary, they rely on this emergent behavior, right? So it's the low-level interactions, like what our customers maybe they go and do on our website day to day, or how they go about their lives and deciding what things to buy or what products and services to use and anything like that. And out of that come high-level effects. So there's this idea that all these small things that we go about doing every day, somehow a pattern, like some sort of bigger structure emerges out of them. And what's of interest to us here is how can we actually identify these patterns, harness the power behind them, and do something about them. Because this is the logic that we want to capture and build in our systems to make them smarter. This is our personalization algorithm, without knowing you specifically, is actually going to give you a good recommendation, knowing that your behavior matches the patterns of so many other people that behave like you, and this is what they like, so you're probably going to like this too. And the idea behind that is very simple, right? Because we don't have the capacity to design one specific recommendation, personalized system like for every single one of you. It's an idea that a guy that had nothing to do with all of these things back in the 60s simply put like in one sentence. And what he said, he was an economist named John Robinson, doesn't really matter, but what he said was that a model which takes into account for all the variation is not of much use, right? It's like having a map that's on a scale of 1 to 1. Where are you going to go with it? So what we need to do is we need to somehow abstract all of these like low-level interactions, capture the high-level patterns, and do something about it. In this article, Ben Victor kind of like associates this idea with a ladder, right? It's this abstraction ladder. So you're at this level designing for a system with the data that you have at hand, with your customers, with an algorithm or whatever you have in mind. And what he says is like, okay, try and go a step up or try and go a step down and see what happens. So try and go a step down to deep dive into like the small details and try and understand what happens into them. Or go a step up to see like this whole system from a very high up level perspective and see what's going on there, right? And I kind of like this. And what do I usually propose, or how I actually go about doing this myself, is that every time we go through that same process that we talked about before about product management, it's like every time we run an iteration around this circle, I just take some time to go through this step of abstraction, right? Every time we've completed a cycle, like we tested something, maybe we rolled it out, maybe we found out it was a horrible idea and we rolled it back, right? I'll just go grab a coffee. It doesn't need to be anything extreme. Maybe it's just like 10 minutes, me sitting quietly with my notebook, just jotting things down. And I go and ask myself all these questions like, okay, what is missing from this system? I go a step up and I ask myself, what if I had anything I want to develop? What if I had all the data in the world? What would those be? Can I identify some of those that I can actually bring in to make this thing better? Then I go down in the details and I think like, okay, this is what we saw that happened when we tested this thing, like this specific interaction and that effect. Does this make sense? Why is this happening? I just like think it over and through and make some notes. And through that process, these are some of the things I'm really trying to think about. So the first thing I think about is, were we using and assessing the right metrics for what we were trying to improve? Like, was our system actually being assessed on what it was trying to achieve? And here I put this parenthesis, but this is actually super important, right? Is it a single or is it a multiple objective? Like, do our customers come to our site, do they come for our product, and they all want the same thing, or do they all want different things? If they want different things, do they actually manage to get these different things? Is the experience equally good for every customer that has a different need? The same process that I do for the system, I like to do it for my data. It's kind of like what I said before. What if I had like all the data available in the world? What would I want that to be? Or if I think that I'm missing something, how could I fill that in? What I also think about is the data that I have too small or too big or too granular or too aggregated? Like, if I'm looking at like very low level data, what if I just go up? What if I just group them together and then I see some patterns emerging that I couldn't just see because the data was too low level, too broken down for these patterns to be noticeable? Then I just kind of like rethink the whole thing together. Like, what is the system? Like, what is it that we're trying to do? We're trying to build like a personalization system, right? What's the data coming in? What's the data coming out? What is it comprised of? Is something missing? What could I add to make it better? Another very important thing is it static? Is it the same today as it was a year ago, or is it going to be the same a year from now? And this is not just about my system, it's also about like anything that goes in and out of my system. Are my customers the same as they were a year ago, or are they going to be the same a year from now? Should I be optimizing for today, or should I be continually optimizing this system over time, like every single day, or like every now and then just try and improve it, right? And if we really want to sort of design for complex and abstract systems, we really need to do these things. We really need to consider the implication and downstream effects that these have. So I'm going to make this change, I'm going to design this system. What does this mean for the experience of my user, the experience of my customer, further down the line? Does it maybe have any unintended consequences? What's the worst case scenario? What can happen? What can go wrong? And what can I do to prevent it? Can I build some logic to help us get out of that? And this is the best. I've left it for last, just so I can say, maybe all of this just doesn't matter, Maybe the problem we're actually trying to solve isn't what we thought it is, and we should just reframe, change the question, change our mindset. Maybe what we're designing in the first place is not actually what our customers need or want. It's not the problem they have, and we should just simply go after something different. Cool. So with that, I'm just going to make a very small parenthesis to highlight some cool things, and with that, I'm just going to wrap it up and leave you guys. So as our systems are actually becoming more complex, because we're building this really complicated recommendation system and personalization system, so we can better address like these needs that each and every customer has that otherwise we wouldn't have the ability to. We come across this very serious problem, right? We don't have a good way to evaluate systems that are so complex and so intricate in design. And if we want to know that these things we're doing actually work, this is super important. We can't go without it. But the good thing is there are a lot of things happening in the industry. I mean, a lot of it just maybe has to do with machine learning or statistics, and it might not necessarily be of interest to you. So I won't really bore you with all of this stuff. But it's there if you're really interested to go and have a look. and know that there are super interesting things actually happening out there to kind of get us out of like this A/B test paradigm that is the bread and butter of product management. I'm not saying that it's not working, but maybe with smarter systems, we actually need smarter ways to also evaluate and understand what these systems are doing. Cool. I think that's about it for the core of the presentation. I'm just going to leave you with this sort of really, really small bite-sized takeaways, so you can actually take something away that you will hopefully remember, and maybe you will adapt it into your day-to-day job or thinking process or whatever, and utilize however you want. So the first one is just like, as you go through these design and engineering processes, rethinking all of this stuff, really do take the time to take a step back and reassess between all these integrations that you're doing over your product cycles. Really try to abstract your thinking, like go really up high, go really down low in details, see what's different, and then see if you can find something that's off or missing, or something that you feel like it's lacking and could be improved. And as I said, like, this could just be you having a cup of coffee for 10 minutes every 3 months, but it might actually really, really help your thinking. Now, as you design these really complex systems, I really want you to be thinking about the outcomes. What are the implications and downstream effects every change that you make is going to have for you, for your customers, or for the company as a whole, whatever. And the very last one is obviously what I really quickly touch base on. Make sure you're actually evaluating, you're assessing the right thing. If you're designing a complex system and you're trying to measure the impact it has on your customers, it's really important to understand that you're evaluating what's important for them. Because what's important for your users, your customers, might not necessarily be what's important for the company. And in this disparity, in this small gap, make sure that you're doing something to actually bring it a little bit closer together. Cool. So that's about it for me. And I'll happily take any questions you want. I know that this was kind of abstract, maybe too out there for some of you, but I'm more than happy to stay back here. Actually, I'll stay for a long time if you just want to chat. It's interesting. Like, these are challenges I have every day, and these are very real problems. And it's actually very interesting to think what other people are, thinking and doing about it. That's it. Go for it.
You mentioned you're working on a couple of complex problems at the moment. What's a problem that you're working through now that you haven't solved?
God, I'm not sure I'm allowed to say everything, but I'll give you some ideas. I'll give you essentially the same thing that Netflix is doing. Netflix is doing two things that are really complicated. One is obviously building a very complex personalization algorithm that recommends to you what they think you're going to like based on what you've liked before, based on other attributes that you have or anything like that. So one is showing relevant product recommendations. And then the other thing is, okay, you're going to get all these things that are carousels with recommendations, like this movie first, this movie second, this movie third, and so on and so forth, right? The second thing they're doing that's super interesting is they're not just personalizing the list order, the sort order that you get to see. They are also personalizing the imagery. So the artwork that you get to see in the thumbnail, or the artwork you get, like you hover over it to see maybe some information, something like that. Even the text is probably personalized. Like the snippet that describes what this film is about is actually personalized for you. And the way to do that is actually really complicated, but it's super interesting, because this means that, if I don't remember if I've actually linked that article. I'm sure if you actually look up like Netflix artwork optimization or personalization or something like that, you'll find it. It's super interesting. Does that kind of give you an idea of how complicated things can get in this sense?
Exactly right.
Yeah. Thanks. Cool.
Going back to your Netflix example, say for example, there was Netflix has just got eventually something that's going to be quite popular, and they've got a kind of free subscription sign up. How do you kind of differentiate customers that could potentially have like a CLV, like customer lifetime value, to those that would have a high churn rate, probably watch it and then close their membership out after that?
I mean, hopefully whatever company out there should be doing, I'm not sure the people at Netflix are more than smart enough to do that, is that every time you're making a change like that, you need to have like a system in place that you can actually measure the impact these things have. Like either if it's like through incrementality testing, A/B testing, or any other method, so that they can attribute what uplifts, well, or downlifts they have in their key metrics that are attributable to the changes they're making is actually coming from that. I don't think this is anything too complicated. It's just making sure that you have a system in place that ensures that every change you make, you can actually somehow measure the impact it has. And in that case, for example, it's just like a marketing campaign. So it's easy. It has like you can track the clicks where the user came from and have like an attribution for the marketing channel or something like that, or a coupon code that they signed up with if it was an offer or something like that. And they can even A/B test it or just do an incrementality test on that. But in, let's say, the case I was saying before, can you imagine having to test a recommendation algorithm and at the same time, on top of it, test another personalization algorithm that changes the images? That's way more complicated actually to build a bulletproof system so you can actually attribute what's the impact of one, what's the impact of the other thing. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Given what you've explained and your approach, your perspective, how do you find your relationship with product managers? Do they think where you are now? Do they think along similar lines, or do you find that there's a difference in mindset from kind of what you've expressed to what you have to deal with at work?
I think that's a really interesting question because from my experience, what is happening is that everyone that's engaged in the design process, and when I say the design process, I don't mean like the hands-on design. I don't just mean the design of designing things. I mean like us as a team designing a complex system. So that's probably like your product manager, your analyst, your designer, your data scientist, your developers, your engineers, everyone, right? Everyone has a part to play in the design process of how we think and formulate, make the system come together. And what I find is that everyone is trying to do what I kind of described in their own way. What your data scientist is going to be doing is going to be very different from what your product manager is doing. But sharing that between you is super valuable. That's the important thing, and that's why I think like this is fairly common again, like in the product manager cycles, that you have all these processes in place to make sure that these things can be shared in an easy and digestible way, and in a way that everyone's opinion can be heard and is valuable, right? Because what insights someone might have from going through this process from a product management perspective is probably going to be very, very different from a data science perspective, right? And for example, when your data scientist is building the algorithm, most of these things are actually things he's really, really, he or she is super hard trying to address before he even puts something in production, right? So in the design process, they're already trying to address this thing, like extract these biases and address all these problems, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful in the first go, right? Does it kind of answer?
Yeah, and your exact relationship with product managers as an analyst?
God, that's... I don't know, it's really shaky. Like, for me, what I find is that with some people, it just works, some people it doesn't. It's more about chemistry and like how, with some people you think alike, and your thinking makes sense to them, and the other way around, and some people it just doesn't work. But you still have to try, and I think that there's a different challenge, especially for me, which I'm not that great with people, I'll be honest. Like, that's not the strong point in my skill set and in what I do. Actually, me standing here today doing all of this, I'll just say that. But it's really something that's like, I really want to try. Because if you're not making it work with someone, it means you're missing out on something.
Somewhat of a related question to the previous ones.
Sure.
What characteristics would you consider, what would you look for in a good product manager? What would be a good product manager to work with as a data scientist yourself?
I really haven't thought about that. I really haven't. I should have. Like, having spent this much time doing what I'm doing. I think like what I really value is like, I really do value the people that understand that some things actually are worth getting them right, and it takes time. I understand like why product managers can be very pushy and why like they want to go fast for some things, because it's the same idea I was saying before. Like, we like prototyping fast, we like iterating fast, But some things are really important to get them right, you know, that you can't just cut corners with some things. And when I'm working on something like that, I want them to understand, you know what, we're just going to take some time on this because this is super important. We can cut 1,000 corners and things that are less important and push them down our backlog. But when the time comes, I really want to emphasize on that. And other than that, I think the other thing I really value is actually people that, when they have no idea what you're talking about, are actually going to be up straightforward with you, saying, I have no idea what you're talking about. Can you actually explain this to me? Because it happens very often, right? Like, all these people working in the same pod or pillar, or whatever you want to call it, like, it has so many names out there in the industry. They have these completely different roles, completely different backgrounds, and they need a way to communicate between themselves. They're completely different experiences and skill sets and whatever, right? It's hard to find a common language, and when it doesn't work, you need to say something. Like, you need to make sure everyone's on the same page so you can take the time and work it through. Because when my product manager is asking that really stupid question about how an algorithm works, and I have to explain it, which might even be hard for me to do, I'm getting something out of it. If I do manage to make him or her understand, then it means that next time you do something, he's going to have a smart idea. Which otherwise, if he didn't understand the system, he wouldn't, right? Yeah, go for it.
Well, question, I guess it may be a bit too low level, but the thing is, on Expedia size,
Yeah.
I can imagine you are running multiple experiments at the same time with regards to personalization algorithms. Then I can completely imagine you're running separate experiments with regards to, let's say, overall UI or overall functionality.
Mm-hmm.
And then also your scale, definitely you're going to have certain marketing activities which are specific to certain areas or markets that are all happening at the same time. And as you mentioned before, isolating the consequences of all those things happening is not straightforward. Do you, and I'm talking not about just first order consequences, but also second and third. So do you just isolate cohorts as the most straightforward approach, or do you use anything more sophisticated to do that?
So I would say we do a few things. So the first thing we do is the fairly obvious one. If we're testing some, big feature, big change in something, don't test another one on like something very closely related to like the same thing or something like that, right? And that's actually a good question, because like what it highlights behind it is that you have a limited amount of traffic, customers or users, and they have a finite amount of money as well. And you need to manage that. Like, it's super important that you optimize what you're actually trying to get out of that, right? So one thing we do is obviously don't do the stupid thing of trying two things on the same feature. That's going to break your experiments. The second thing we do is you can kind of assume that two unrelated features, if you truly randomly split traffic between them, are not gonna impact one another. That's not really the case. But what we've done is we've built like an in-house interaction effect detection tool, which is not perfect, but it can help you understand like where there might be issues. In like, let's say, two different things you're testing at the same time are having some sort of unexpected weird correlation effect, or somehow compounding like they experience or something like that.
If it's not a secret, what do you use for that system? Like, what's the underlying algorithm?
Well, honestly, okay. Sorry?
Is that tag manager?
No, we use Tag Manager for different things, not for the interaction effects. I'll be honest with you, I don't work with that. I have no idea. I've never seen actually the code. I'm not familiar with it. We're actually making me more interested to actually go and have a look now. But I'm sure if you start digging around, you'll find some interesting things online, right? But it is a very, very real and a very hard problem to address.
If it's on a scale, larger scale, maybe it sounds easier to do on a smaller scale.
On a smaller scale, I mean, one of the things I even had highlighted there is that there's more you can get out of your traffic and user experience with the metrics you use. So one idea is like obviously optimize for multi-objective user experience, not for a single objective. Don't look at one metric, maybe create some sort of combination that's reflecting of what you're actually trying to achieve. And that should give you higher sensitivity towards all these things.
I think is it R or Python that can do this analytics?
Honestly, whatever you want. Our team's pretty pretty much like work with whatever they feel mostly comfortable and everyone kind of can agree on. So we have teams working mostly on R. Personally, I work mostly on Python. It's the same thing, honestly. I just find something slightly more convenient in Python than I do in R. A lot of our data science team actually writes stuff in Scala these days, some Java stuff, lots of Spark behind just for like the data management and other things.
Yeah. Related as well, how technical do you think, or would you prefer product managers to be?
I don't say everyone. What I do value out of the product manager is actually being able to drive the product in a direction that I can sort of resonate with, and I feel like it's the right direction to take it in, and I see what they're trying to get out of it and the value in what they're trying to do. And the second thing is like, I just value them being able to engage in discussion and get ideas out there themselves and from the people around that they have to manage. They can do that without being technical, and that's a fantastic thing, right? Sure, go for it.
What tips would you have for startups that are looking to hire their first product manager?
I have no idea. That's a very different question because it's nothing I have experience with. Like I've worked in a startup, but it wasn't tech related, so I can't really associate with that experience. Like my experience of working in tech and science stuff has been at a very, very large scale with very large teams. But like from
Certified by product school.
yeah, I mean that works. To be honest, because before doing this talk, obviously I've engaged with products while I taught one class, and I think like it's the things you can get out of this are actually quite interesting and valuable. So a big part of the class that I did was actually teaching more technical skills to people that don't have technical skills, and even the focus of the class was not actually trying to get anyone out of the class knowing tool X or tool Y or how to do this or how to do that, but just having the understanding of these more complicated systems and processes so they can talk about them, and they can talk about them with other people, and they can think about them. So they can leverage that radiation. Sorry, coming back to your question. I really don't know. From my experience with working on a completely unrelated startup, and when I joined, it was just 3 of us. What I found like the best thing for me is like between the 3 of us, we had very different skill sets, and each one of us could really drive one aspect of the company. And what I found like myself doing a lot was just keep moving forward no matter what. And you need someone that has like the resilience and the momentum and the willpower to just, go through that, just plow through that. But take it for what it is.
Would you say that with personalization, there's a bit of a danger sometimes that the customer gets exactly the same thing over and over again?
Yeah.
That's my personal experience with Netflix. For example, I just keep seeing exactly the same movie with different actors all the time. That really frustrates me because I value the discovery bit.
Yeah.
And what would you say would be the solution to that, or what should we keep in mind when we personalize and recommend?
Mm-hmm. So the example of that case is very simple. I mean, probably, again, I don't know. It's just that Netflix has realized that a lot of users like recycling stuff, so binge watching the same thing over and over again. Like you've seen a movie that you liked, very likely that 3 months down the road you're gonna want to watch that movie again. But maybe for some users that's not relevant, and that's like room for improvement for them. Find out which of these users are that they value discovery more than recycling the same content, and change the experience for them. And this relates to going back and thinking, what's the right metric to use? How am I assessing this experience? What is the outcome I'm designing for, right? What is it that you truly want? Am I offering you that? And I think just that's just a way to.
Would you say there's an opening from the big tech firms in terms of getting feedback from their customers when they personalize products for them?
Absolutely. And this is something I have experience with for my company. Like we engage in customer research all the time. Like we'll have people actually come into our offices, talk about their experience, talk about the products. Obviously, we have all the user-generated content, reviews. We gather a lot of feedback. Actually, one interesting thing maybe to highlight for this is that with the more complex systems we're designing, we're kind of introducing these feedback collection loops from customers on the go. So, for example, what you were saying about Netflix, right? I go back and back and back again and again the same recommendations, right? I get the same stuff. I don't want to watch this Netflix. I've watched this 1,000 times. By you not actually clicking on it, Netflix might actually be gathering that information and realizing, you know what, showing this thing over and over again to this specific person doesn't work. Change it up.
I'm still waiting for it.
Yeah.
Nothing happened, still the same thing.
You're slowly getting there. Cool.